Welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at the Federal Register in its print format. We'll talk about what it is, what it contains, and what it looks like. The odds are very slim that you're ever going to use the Federal Register in print, but I think it's important to be familiar with the print format so you understand what you're looking at when you use it online. It's easiest to think of the Federal Register as the official newspaper of the executive branch of the federal government. Everything gets published. That's part of the notice and opportunity to be heard. That's part of due process. It's published every workday, so Monday through Friday, except for holidays. And it's cumulatively paginated. Now, what do I mean by that? Every year is a new volume, and each volume consists of a couple hundred issues, because, as I said, it's published every workday. So the first issue of a new volume will start with page 1, and it may end with, say, page 110. And the second issue will start with page 111 and end with, say, page 205, and so forth throughout the course of the year. The page numbers accumulate over the course of the year. So by the end of the year, you could have a final page number of something like 62,912. That's what cumulative pagination means. There's 4 kinds of information you'll find in the Federal Register. First, presidential documents. Some presidential documents are required to be published in the Federal Register. Some are permitted to be published there if the White House chooses, but the rest aren't. Second, the final version of rules. Now, this could either be a complete copy of the final version of rules, or if there were no changes made from the proposed rules, it may simply be a notice that the proposed rules published on such and such a date have been finalized. Third, proposed rules. And this is probably the most important item because this is what allows the public to become involved with the government. When they see proposed rules published, they have the opportunity to comment on those rules. And fourth, notices. Agencies will publish notices of certain things like meetings, hearings, and so forth that they're going to hold. At the beginning of each issue, there will be a table of contents. The table of contents is organized by government department or bureau or agency, and under each of those, it will tell you what's included. This is the 3-page table of contents from this particular issue. Now, I know it's too small and you can't read it, so in the next slide, I've increased the size of the beginning of the first page. So here's the beginning of the first page of the table of contents, just to give you a little more information. For example, you see over there on the right is the Environmental Protection Agency, and it's got 2 things listed, rules and notices. And under rules, it has several different rules with the corresponding page number. Under notices, it has a few things it's submitting notification of. On the left, we have the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. You'll notice there are no rules, just notices. If this were the 3rd page of the table of contents, under P, you'd find presidential documents listed. There is one presidential document in this particular issue, and I'll show you that in a minute. So it's also listed, but it's listed under P for presidential documents. The next page after the table of contents has the CFR parts affected in this issue table. And what this tells you is what parts of the Code of Federal Regulation are affected or would be affected by rules or proposed rules that have been published in this issue of the Federal Register. So after the CFR sections affected table, the actual content of the issue begins. Now I'm just going to show you an example of the different types of content. Here we have the only presidential document that is in this issue. On the left, you see the excerpt from the index, since I didn't show it to you earlier. And then the other 2 parts are the actual presidential proclamation that was published in this issue. Now this slide shows you an example of a final rule being published. On the left is the entry from the index. So if you were interested in the Environmental Protection Agency, for example, you would look it up in the table of contents. And here, for example, you see that they have published the final rules of the New Hampshire Ambient Air Quality Standards. Staying on the left, you see that it gives you the page numbers to go to. Over on the right, on the top left-hand corner, you can see where I've highlighted the page number, the first page number of that range. And then down in the middle column, you can see some more highlighting. I don't know why that highlighting has slid to the right. It's on the PDF. It's not part of the video editing. At the bottom of the highlighting, you can see action, final rule. So that's telling you that here is the publication of the final rules. It goes on for a couple of pages. Now this slide shows you an example of a proposed rule. On the left, you can see the entry from the table of contents, and it gives you the page number to turn to for a proposed rule about the growing of grapes in California. On the right, in the left-hand column, you can see where it says action. It's proposed rules and opportunity to file exceptions. Further down in that column, you can see the deadline by which to file your exceptions and where to send your written exceptions. In the middle column, you can see information about who to contact to get further information. Now we come to an example of a notice that you might find in the Federal Register. Here on the left, you can see the table of contents listing. It's a notice of a meeting by the Civil Rights Commission, and it gives you the page number. On the right, you'll see at least the first page of the notice. And you get all the information you need about the meeting, where it will be held, and who to contact for information, etc. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, so I'll just leave it on the screen for a moment so you can take a look. And finally, we come to something that you'll never use unless you're forced to use the Federal Register in print. You may remember at the beginning of the volume, I very briefly showed you something called a list of sections affected or list of parts affected, I'm not sure which. And that made it possible for you to check quickly to see if there was any particular section in the Code of Federal Regulations that was affected by something in this particular issue of the Federal Register. Now the one at the end covers the entire month, and so you could check to see if there have been any publications in the Federal Register for the entire month up to that date that affect a particular section of the Code of Federal Regulations. And back in the day, we had to use these to update our research, so that if you had a particular section of the Code of Federal Regulations and it's been 5 months, you would check the last issue of each month in that volume to see if there had been anything published that affected that section of the CFR. But odds are you're going to do all this research online, and they're pretty much updated right away, so you won't need to use this. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. And this brings us to our next subject, the Code of Federal Regulations, which we'll cover in the next video.